Okay, this is gonna be genetics, and I don't know if it's gonna like be part one or something, cause just depends how far I get. So I don't know if there's gonna be multiple parts or whatever. Either way, so genetics is also called Mendelian genetics. So why? It's because Mendel is the father of genetics. He came up with like the laws of genetics. He didn't know anything about bio or genetics or anything like that, but he just came up with it because he was like a pea planter. He looked at the peas, he figured stuff out based on that. Obviously, over time, scientists like enhanced the laws and whatever, and like now there's exceptions to the laws and like stuff like that. But the overall laws he came up with, and he is the father of genetics. So that's why it's called Mendelian genetics. Okay. Another thing to know before we actually go into it is the difference between traits and characteristics. Traits are like hair and eye color and I don't know, and characteristics of the traits would be curly hair or blue eyes. So like everyone has eye color, but the characteristics make everyone different. Like, I mean, some people obviously have the same blue eyes and whatever, but yeah. Anyways, also, the difference between phenotype and genotype. What are they? So phenotype is how does whatever look to someone's eyes. But that isn't necessarily what their genotype is. I mean, what genotype is like what does the genes actually say? So just because my phenotype, how I look, is tall, doesn't mean that my genes necessarily say that. Okay, so homologous pairs of chromosomes. So as you know or may know, humans specifically have 46 chromosomes, but it doesn't matter. Every organism has a certain amount of chromosomes for their species, and all of their chromosomes have homologous pairs. So this is one of the chromosomes in the pair they got from their mom, and one of the chromosomes in the pair they got from their dad. So they don't need to necessarily be the same, but sometimes they are the same. I'm going to give an example. Okay, so let's say we're talking about height. So let's say both of the alleles on the chromosomes will say tall, because you got a tall from your mom and a tall from your dad. Or both of the chromosomes in the homologous pair say short. Then that organism is referred to as homozygous. Again, it just means you have a tall and a tall from your mom and from your dad, but you have two talls or you have two shorts. If you have the same for both, you're called homozygous. But let's say you have a tall and a short, or if you have a short and a tall, then you're called heterozygous. Yeah. Okay, laws of genetics that Mendel came up with. So we have law of dominance, law of segregation and recombination, and law of independent assortment. Okay. Law of dominance. Law of dominance says that the dominant gene overrides the recessive gene. By the way, a P gen is the parent generation. So if you take a homozygous parent, which homozygous means the parent has two of the same, and you made it with, to give an example, let's say for height, this homozygous parent has tall and tall, and you mate this homozygous parent with another homozygous parent, but he or she is the opposite trait. So homozygous tall and tall, you mate him with a homozygous short and short. Then the F1 means the generation born from the P generation. 100% of the F1 generation will look one way. Their phenotype will all be the same. They will all look dominant. So in this case, the tall is the dominant one. So all of the children, all of the F1 generation from the P generation will be tall in this case. The trait that is not dominant is called recessive. So in every relationship in this law, there will be a dominant and a recessive gene. But phenotypically, they'll all look dominant. But genotypically, the kids' genes will be heterozygous because they're going to get one tall and they're going to get one short. So a Punnett square is like trying to map this out. So I'm going to show you. So I have a little whiteboard to try to show you this. I'm going to use brown. I don't know why. Okay. Actually, I don't like the brown. I'm going to use red. Okay. Okay, so this is the box. And then we're going to have a tall and a tall parent meet with a short and a short. And for Punnett squares, the recessive gene is the lowercase letter of the dominant gene. So tall is uppercase T and short is lowercase t. And if you bring it down, which I'm sure you guys all know how to do after whatever, 100% of the kids will be heterozygous because they're going to have one tall and one short. 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 But its phenotype, if you look at the dominant one, they're all going to be tall because they all, I wasn't showing it. They're all going to be tall because they all have one dominant, one recessive, and the dominant one will win. So if the two parents are homozygous but opposite traits, the kids will be heterozygous phenotypically. I meant heterozygous genotypically, but they'll look dominant phenotypically. Okay, but what if we do an F1 heterozygous with another F1 heterozygous? What will happen to the kids? So we're going to make another Punnett square. You could do it on your paper if you want. Oh, I just made it so badly, but whatever. I'll fix it. It's still pretty bad, but whatever. Then it'll be, okay, wait, I want to show you before I actually fill it in. So it'll be, see how this is the parent, this is the other parent. Then if you bring them down, you'll have a tall and a tall for this box. Whatever. You do it yourself, and then I'll show you when I'm done. Okay. Then we're going to have, it's going to be a little bit different. They're not all going to be the same. So here, 25% are going to look tall because, phenotypically, they're going to look tall. 25% will look short because, yeah. And 50% are phenotypically going to look tall because of the dominant one, but genotypically, they're heterozygous. So if we add this all up, figure it out all together, phenotypically, which means their looks, 75% are going to be tall because it's all of these people will be tall. And 25% will be short. But genotypically, we're going to have a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio of 25% homozygous short, 25% homozygous tall, and then 50% heterozygous. But in the genotype, we just said genotype. In the phenotype, how they're going to look, it's going to be a 3 to 1 ratio. 3 being tall and 1 being short. Or 3 being recessive and 1 being, 3 being dominant and 1 being recessive. Sorry. Okay, now we're going to go on. I'm taking so much time. Okay. But if you see so we just did that whole thing. So basically the only way for someone to basically look short, not a human, but the only way for a plant to look short is if there's 2 recessive genes together, because otherwise it'll look tall. If there's a dominant and a recessive, it's going to be dominant. So the only way for someone to look short is if there's two shorts. So if you see a short plant, you 100% know its genotype. It's going to be homozygous recessive. But if you see a tall plant, you don't know its genotype. It could either be homozygous dominant or it could be heterozygous because dominant will win. So how would we know what the genotype of this tall plant would be? We do a test cross. Basically, you're going to mate it with a homozygous recessive. So you're going to make this unknown thing with this tall plant, we don't know what its genotype is, with a homozygous recessive. If all of its offspring is tall, it means that the unknown plant's genotype is homozygous tall. Because that way, in all of the boxes, there would be a tall, and then all of its kids would be tall. But if there's any short offsprings, it means that the unknown plant genotype is heterozygous, because if the offspring is short, it means that both of its parents gave a short gene, but a homozygous tall wouldn't be able to do that. So it's obviously heterozygous. Okay, the next law is the law of segregation and recombination. Segregation happens during meiosis. It means that the chromosomes will half, and this will make the sperm or the egg cell. So it's basically, during meiosis when, like, you're making the gamete cell or whatever, okay? And then recombination is during fertilization when the egg and the sperm will recombine. Not recombine, but they'll combine. So basically, if we're combining two heterozygous, which is like a tall, short, whatever, you know what I mean? Then here we have let's say the eggs. Here they're separating into two different things. Here's the sperms. They're separating. And then here we have recombination. Doing this like sideways. Doesn't really matter because this doesn't really, whatever. But now in the actual box, that's recombination. So that's what it would look like on a Punnett square, if you know what I mean. Like here is the segregation, and here's the recombination inside the box. Okay. Okay, so we could look at the results, but for this law, it doesn't really matter because basically the whole point of the law is that they separate and then they come back together. Okay, law of independent assortment. This says, if there are multiple traits, meaning like height or eye color, if they're found on different chromosome pairs, the way that one pair, like, let's say height, separates has nothing to do with the separating and inheriting of the other pair. Example, eye color. It just has to do with how they lined up during meiosis, like on the metaphase plate. So when they were in the parent's body and the regular cell was turning into a, let's say, egg cell, the way that the 46 chromosomes in humans gets turned into 26, where they half the height and one's, like the pair, when they're a pair and then they half, that has nothing to do, let's say this is tall and this is short, that has nothing to do with the way that the blue eye and the green eye separate. They don't have to do with it if they're on different chromosomes. Because one could go to the right side, one could go to the left side, it doesn't really matter. But Mendel did not discuss, this is like an exception, gene linkage. Let's say different traits are on the same chromosome, because each chromosome has tons of traits. This way, if the chromosome separates in a certain way, it affects all of the traits on it. So, if the two traits are on different chromosomes, they'll be independent from each other. But if they're on the same one, they'll all have to go together. Because, let me show you. Yeah, actually. I don't know if how I'm doing it really makes sense. No, whatever, I just won't draw it. But if you know what I mean. Like if they're all on the same chromosome, then they're obviously going to be inherited together. So it does matter. It does affect each other. But if they're on the same, except if there's crossing over. So when the alleles break and change, it could change up the chromosomes, and that way, let's say brown hair and blue eyes are on one chromosome, they would normally be inherited together and they would affect each other, but they wouldn't if the blue eyes switched with brown eyes on a different chromosome, and now the way that brown hair gets inherited doesn't have to do with the blue eyes because the blue eyes is no longer on that chromosome anymore. So to break this all down, law of independent assortment means that the way that brown hair gets inherited has nothing to do with the way that blue eyes get inherited. I was just giving examples. Except this mental did not talk about is if brown hair and blue eyes are on the same chromosome. Then the way that it separates, of course, has to do with each other because they're on the same chromosome. But an exception to that is that if there's crossing over in which the brown hair and the blue eyes are together, but this breaks off and a different one comes on. Now the way that the brown hair and blue eyes get separated has nothing to do with each other again. I'm going to do more exceptions in a new video because this is already 15 minutes.